Hey, everybody, it's Carter Froelich. And our mission at Launch Development Finance Advisors is to be a hero to the land development and home building community. We do that through a lot of different ways, but one of the ways that I want to give back to the industry is to be able to share our experience as well as the experience of a myriad of different players in our industry, their experience, what they've learned, what they're doing, and just the knowledge that they have to provide to the industry. With that having been said, I hope you enjoy this episode. And if there's anything that we can do at launch to help you finance infrastructure, reduce costs, mitigate risk, all with the goal of enhancing project profitability and returns, please give us a call at the contact information in the show notes.
Welcome to the Land to Lots podcast, powered by Launch Development Finance Advisors. And now your host, Carter Froelich.
Welcome, everybody. It's Carter Froelich, and it's great to be before you again here today for another Land to Lots podcast. Today, I'm welcoming to the podcast one of my good friends and a colleague who we work with all over Texas, Ross Martin. And Ross is a shareholder with the law firm of Winstead in Dallas. And Ross, for those of you that may not be familiar with Ross, he is an expert in matters of public finance in Texas. He addresses all the flavors of financings, 380s, 381s, PIDs, MUDs, TIRZs, MMDs, all of the flavors. So Ross, welcome to the podcast. Great to have you here today.
Great. Thank you very much, Carter. It's an honor to be here. Thanks for inviting me on.
Great. Well, we've got a lot to talk about. There's a lot going on in Texas, which is fantastic. But before we get started, maybe you could, for those of our listeners that aren't familiar with you or your firm, if you could just give a little background on who you are and what you do and how you got to Winstead.
That'd be great. Thank you. I've been at Winstead 10 years, been practicing law over 20 years. And solely in the space of special districts. That's all I've ever done. Here at Winstead, we have a great team in that area with many attorneys that work in this space.
Yeah.
And we also have a lot of lawyers. We have 330 lawyers statewide, also in Charlotte, New York, and Nashville. And it provides us with a lot of depth, not only in special districts, but also in real estate, litigation. We have a great, HOA governance group, land use, water rights. So we have all that at our fingertips, which has been very helpful for me in my practice, just working with special districts and also working with just large master plan communities.
Yeah.
So it's been a great experience and glad to be here.
Well, we really appreciate all your expertise, and we've had the opportunity to work on all sorts of different financings in Texas. So thank you.
Thank you.
The one thing I've really noticed as it relates to some of the legal practitioners in Texas is that you have really started to run with the municipal management districts. And what we have found, at least working with the private sector, that the MMDs are a very flexible tool that create a lot of certainty, at least from our perspective. And one of the things I'd like to do is talk to you about the MMD, your practice, what you're seeing in terms of what's really happening in Texas. So. And we can riff on other things as well. But as a beginning, could you describe the MMD to our listeners, what that is, and then we'll dig in from there.
Sure. So an MMD is a municipal management district. It's a political subdivision of the state of Texas. And like a lot of other districts, is governed by constitutional provisions as well as Chapter 375 Local Government Code and Chapter 49 Water Code. In a lot of respects, it's similar to a MUD. It has similar authority, but it has expanded authority in a lot of key areas. And it has expanded authority in that it can issue assessment bonds. It can levy assessments for special supplemental services within the district. The statute was codified in 1991. And if you look at Chapter 375 Local Government Code, it feels like an in-city district that is there to finance capital improvements and also to provide supplemental services. And for many years, that's how it was used, and it's continued to be used today.
Mhm.
Uh, as things evolved, it has been used more and more for raw land development, which is where we've seen a lot of our work with the tool. We have done it in city and have used that in its probably original intent, but we've used it a lot for raw land development. How it
Oh,
came
oh, yeah.
about, go ahead.
Yeah, yeah. I was just going to ask you, how did it come about? I mean, what? So thanks. You read my mind.
Well, we have so we do lots of MUDs.
Hmm.
As all the practitioners in this area do. MUDs are a great tool. We work with them every day. But it became clear on a lot of some of these other projects that had different financing needs, or really needed that supplemental service piece, or just needed a little more flexibility, that we needed something that we could amend to fit some of these projects that weren't a kind of typical, single
Yeah.
family residential type district. So, working with the legislature, there were a lot of municipal management district bills that were passed because that was really the only way to utilize it outside of Chapter 375 at the time. You had to pass a special legislative act. It had the authority that you wanted in it, and it became the tool that you used if you just needed a little more flexibility.
Hmm.
Uh, and that was how it evolved over time. The Senate Local Government Committee created a municipal management district template because the acts were very different, to standardize the act. And then there are what I like to call template plus provisions that are, pieces that we've worked with before that we can add on if the project requires that or justifies it. So that is really where it arose. Is it just for projects you needed a little bit more flexibility or some unusual authority? Like, we've created several that have rail authority or do navigational improvements. Those are sorts of things that have been very helpful for MMDs. You don't really need them for every single project,
Yeah.
but for some projects they're very useful. And so that's where it began in the legislature. And we've been working on those for well over 10 years,
Yeah.
getting those created. The bigger change came in the 2023 legislative session, when a MMD that could be created by the TCQ via just 375 without a special legislative act. It
Mhm.
can now have an elected board like a MUD. It can levy an assessment on single family residential property, and retains that supplemental service piece. So it's much more flexible and much more usable right out of the box by
Yeah.
applying the TCQ. So I think that is where you've really seen
Yeah.
uh, a lot more of the districts being used and created.
And I think that's where we'll focus a little bit today, because most of our listeners are in the residential space. They're MPC developers.
Mhm.
Although, do you finance a lot of navigation up in Dallas?
We've done some cove digs
Yeah.
using the tool. We've got some canals planned.
Yeah. Yeah.
Those sorts of
That's
things.
interesting.
That are public improvements.
Yeah.
Uh, can be financed with the tool, and we found that very useful in certain situations.
Okay. So I was being a little facetious. I didn't know you actually did.
Yeah.
So I stand corrected. So let me kind of back up a little bit. So and let's say that I have a piece of dirt and I'm in the city, the incorporated boundaries of a city in Texas. And I need a little bit of flexibility. So what is the process? I come to you, Ross, and go, Ross, I heard about these MMDs. I would like to establish an MMD. Why don't you go into the two avenues, or the most common avenue right now? And you alluded to it a little bit with the changes in 2023. But how would you move forward with the establishment of the district, and then load me up with all of the various types of financing tools that I would need to move forward with financing the eligible infrastructure? And then let's just start there, and then I'll drill down.
The first thing is that an MMD, if it's in city, you need a support resolution from the city you're working with. You're in their corporate limits. Uh, the MMD traditionally in an in-city setting has really been used in conjunction with the city. We had language in there that we had promulgated with the late great Special Districts Committee that allowed us to use Chapter 372, the PID authority, through a district in order to finance using assessments if we're working with the city. So
Okay.
it's one of those things where it's a very close relationship. So typically what I would see is we would work with the city, we would get a development agreement for the in-city district along with a consent resolution.
Mhm.
And we take that consent resolution and we file an application with the TCQ for the creation of the MMD. It looks very similar to a MUD application, and file it with the TCQ. And then you're at TCQ for the prescribed period of time, and then the district gets created, and you're going from there. Uh, what we have seen with working with cities is, the MMD as an alternative to a PID. Some cities, prefer you to have a separate issuer and a separate district within their boundaries. Also, it gives you a little more, long-term security. Some of these projects in city, it used to be some of the in-city projects were, 150 acres. I mean, we have
Yeah.
several thousand acre in-city projects now, and
Yeah.
have
Yeah.
very long build-out times. So for everyone, it's good to have that governance, with the district board. So
So
you're seeing a lot of that.
So when we're talking with the city to get the support resolution, uh, do we need to load up the MMD language with PID authority, or does the MMD allow us the PID authority, or do we have to combine the two?
The MMD allows for the levy of an assessment and the
Correct.
issuance of assessment bonds and a levy over a single family residential property. Uh, you know, Traditionally, the legislation had covered it and used the authority within Chapter 372 Local Government
Right.
Code, the PID Act. 375, when it got expanded, also made clear that all the district's bonds need to be approved by TCQ. The assessments can be levied on single family residential property, and the procedure of it is very similar to a 372 PID, except
Okay.
you're using the district board as
Yeah.
your approving entity rather than the council.
Right.
You also need, however, for a TCQ created district, a capital improvement plan, 5-year capital improvement plan that's approved every 5 years
Mhm.
by the city council when you're in city.
Okay, got it. And is there any, so if we have an in-city MMD, we're issuing assessment bonds and we're going to get into the different types of financings we can utilize. Are there any restrictions as to what the assessments can finance? Could they do the in-tract improvements, or are they primarily regional? Is there any kind, can we finance anything allowable by law, or are there any wrinkles that we need to be aware of as it relates to the assessments?
You can finance all the internal improvements,
Mhm.
similar to any type of district. I mean, most districts, you're going to be financing water, sewer, drainage, and roads.
Yeah.
And part of the beauty of the MMD structure that I like about it is you can issue those using an ad valorem tax bond, like you
Hmm.
would with the MUD, or you can use the assessment bond like you would with a PID. That's been the goal, is just to have that flexibility because, I work with a lot of districts where, we're going to go in city, but we're going to be issuing ad valorem tax bonds and taking
Yeah.
advantage of this assessed value increases over time. I work with a lot of districts where the goal is to go in and, have that assessment bond authority, especially for, some major improvements where you really
Yeah.
need that spark at the beginning.
Yeah.
And then I have some districts that use both, where we finance the major improvements with assessments to get some upfront financing, to get the big offsites done, to get the big internal trunk lines done. And then we've settled in
Hmm.
using that ad valorem tax authority and done internal improvements using that. So
Yeah.
that to
Yeah.
me is really the beauty of the tool is it brings in all these different all these different financing mechanisms, and you can use them however you want. Some people are going to want to use them one way, some people another, some a combination. But it also is really good for financing parks and open space, which in North Texas especially, there's not that authority to do that with a MUD. So we see a lot of that.
So, wow, a lot to unpack there. Are there any limitations on what the effective overall property tax rate increase may be in terms of an ad valorem rate? First, similar to the MUDs and some limitations in different counties. Secondly, if we're issuing both assessments and ad valorem bonds or GO bonds, is there any limitation that anybody takes a look at other than what is the what are other competitive master plans doing?
Right. Well, so on your ad valorem tax levy, you're going to have the same restrictions as any other district that's levying tax
Okay.
as MUD. You're
Yeah.
going to have those tax rate limitations in place. When you layer in assessments, you're really going to have two restrictive factors. One is you can't express that assessment as a pennies per hundred
Yeah.
tax rate millage rate. It automatically goes down once the bonds are issued because it doesn't float with the assessed value.
Right.
You can
Right.
express it that way to show
Yeah.
what you're putting together and what your
Yeah.
tax and assessment looks like. And then there's of course the market forces.
Right.
If you have a tax overlaying an assessment and it's way out of whack, it's just not going to work. So you have legal restrictions, and then you also have market restrictions.
Yeah. And the MMD is, from our perspective, is really awesome. Just for what you said, I can do both GO bonds, I can do assessment bonds, I can do one or I can do the other. And most importantly, and we're going to get back into this, is that when I say the word we, I'm referring to the private sector. We are in control as opposed to having to go through and issue bonds through the city as we would with a PID. So we're creating that certainty for our clients, which is a big deal,
Mhm.
I think. The other thing I should mention is, for instance, this is a structure we use all the time with the CFDs in Arizona. And when we were doing metro districts in Colorado, we could also load those up with an SID or a special improvement district. And initially, the underwriters in Colorado were saying, "Oh, we're not going to do that. We're not going to do that." Now they're all doing it. So I think success leaves clues, and obviously this is working really well in Texas just because of the flexibility and control that we get through the MMD, at least in my perspective.
Yeah, that's certainly been the goal, is to have that flexibility and have that certainty over time. It's interesting also, having worked in this space for a long time, and we do a lot of PIDs
Yeah,
and have worked. We worked on PIDs since 2008. Worked
yeah,
the AG on their guidelines, and I've seen a lot of cities say to me, I don't really want to be the issuer. I prefer not to take on that obligation.
yeah,
I want to put parameters in my development agreement, and then you guys do the rest,
yeah,
knowing that they have that contractual control.
yeah,
So that's been an interesting change. The PID tool is excellent. It works great for a lot of in-city
yeah,
projects, but especially with some of these larger master
yeah.
plans, we're seeing more MMDs.
When you're setting up MMDs, are the cities willing to give you a TIRZ on top of that? Can we load in a TIRZ? Have you seen that occurring very often, or not in your practice? Just depends.
That's definitely occurring,
Yeah,
especially if the city's requesting annexation. If we are coming into the city and doing an MMD, what we're doing is we're leaving our ETJ
yeah,
authority on the table. So we would
hmm
have $1, $1.20, tax rate or
yeah,
assessment rate. Now we're coming into the city and we're layering on that
yeah,
city tax. So we're requesting some TIRZ revenue to help bridge that gap because we're agreeing to annex. So that's where we see a lot of it. I also see a lot of it on just pure in-city projects where we have a lot of infrastructure and large infrastructure costs that need to be taken care of. And so the MMD does its part by levying an additional tax or assessment. The city does its part by putting in some TIRZ revenue.
Yeah. And to me that, so when you're annexing in, and here again, I love my cities. However, they can change over time with, with the electeds. How
Mhm.
are you ensuring, and I'd like to riff with you, we're completely off script right now, but this is
That's
the
fine.
fun part. Yeah. So when we're annexing in and we're loading up in a pre-annexation and development agreement with the city, I know what I like to put in those agreements to ensure that that which is planned is that which is implemented. What are you really, and you're working with the developer at this point, what are you really encouraging them as it relates to the financing and potentially other matters to include in that pre-annexation and development agreement?
Certainty.
Yeah,
Certainty is what we need,
yeah, exactly.
and that's really it. And that for a lot of people, that is why the creation of the tool, with a separate board is important. Is you get that certainty going forward, but the city also gets that certainty because
Yeah,
they have a development agreement that has the parameters for bond issuance. Usually, it has an overall cap on bond issuance. That if you want to change those things, you need to come back to the council to change it. So they feel comfortable
yeah.
that the district's going to run in the way that they've intended. We feel comfortable in that we know we have certainty as long as we're remaining in the parameters of the agreement. And also for the long term is, the developer's not always going to be there.
Yeah.
So at some point, that board is going to be, completely resident controlled, and then they'll be able to control, how they want to spend the money in their own community, especially with some of these larger communities. That's kind of one of the things that I think will happen in the future that isn't really talked about as much right now is that, you know, the MMD does have that authority to levy an assessment for improvements within the area. And I think as you see, the district capital improvement bonds get paid off, you may see some resident boards that are really focused on improving their community and using that tool.
Make sure I come back to that. And I'll talk about the villages. And Ross, that's why I love working with you because you and I have the same, we have to create that certainty, that we can do what we need to do when we need to do it. I know that when we started doing the first PID bonds, back in the 2008s, it it was a lot easier to do. And I think it was because there was maybe not a lot of experience. I mean, there was a lot of cash flow PIDs, but building out of bond proceeds. But when I came back into the state of Texas, I noticed that now the cities were saying, hey, we'll give you a PID if we get 10% of your bond proceeds. Not that all cities are doing that, and some are maybe waning from that now. But couple of questions. Number one, when we're doing an in-city MMD, we having the same conversations? Are you having the same conversations with the city? Are they saying, hey, we really need you to help us improve this traffic interchange, whatever it may be? What are those conversations like with the city's MMD versus PIT?
Yeah, I'm probably seeing less overall of the straight, you know, PID fees, community
Yeah,
benefit fees, these sorts of things, and more a conversation about the infrastructure and how it's going to get financed. I
yeah,
mean, certainly if you have a large NPC and you're working with the city and you're either coming into the city or remaining in the ETJ, but you're wanting their support for your
hmm,
district and your financing, they're going to have some things that they want to get
yeah,
financed as well to help everyone along.
yeah,
So, we understand that going in, and so I'd rather see us work on capital improvements and solving problems than
yeah,
having fees that nobody really knows where they're going. And it's really hard. You can't take them out of bond proceeds because they don't
yeah,
particularly benefit the exact project. So to me, it's better to handle it in the context of we're all solving an infrastructure problem.
yeah.
Where do we spend our money?
And we can always quantify the financial impact of negotiation items, but to have that certainty and the control of the board and the city's support is huge. So I agree with that. Let me a couple of things just related to the the MMD. We talked about the typical eligible public infrastructure, streets, roads, water, sewer, storm and drain, parks. Are there other facilities that you've typically financed, or maybe infrastructure that I didn't mention that comes up, that police and fire? Are we able to finance that as well?
You can finance a lot of
Yeah.
those things. The list of things you can finance with an MMD is much larger
Yeah.
than that with a MUD or even a PID.
Yeah.
And uh, the hard part becomes once you get past your basics, your water, sewer, drainage, roads, parks, stuff that is going to be tax exempt, is going to need to be financed. You've usually used up your tax or assessment at that
Yeah.
point.
Yeah.
So we do get a lot of questions about financing, amenity centers or, other facilities that are not low hanging fruit that are going to, take a little bit of time to work through, uh, or may affect the tax exemption, or may need to be totally public because they are tax exempt. So, a lot of times we try and get through the low hanging fruit, and then we focus on the different things that we can finance. We see a lot of interest in parking garages.
Yeah. Oh,
There's a lot of that going on, especially in urban projects. We see a lot of discussion of using the tool in order to finance parking garages, and then there's a lot of conversations around the public nature of those,
right.
and how you finance them and how you properly allocate the benefit.
Yeah, parking garages are fun. We've had some experience with that too. So that concludes the first episode of my conversation with Ross Martin. Stay tuned in 2 weeks for episode 2.
You have been listening to the Land to Lots podcast with Carter Froelich. Follow us wherever you find your podcast to never miss a new episode.